Hello, and welcome to the second episode of the Design Logic podcast, where we explore the intersection of design, technology, and fabrication in the built environment. This is a podcast series sponsored and produced by Andalusia Design. We have an interest in sparking conversations like this to stay on the current trends and the cutting edge of the design world. If you enjoy the series, it would mean a lot if you like this video and subscribe to the channel. So this time, I sit down and speak with Peter DeMaria, an architect with decades of design experience and a pioneer of prefabricated design and construction. He's engaged with various projects through Mid-Rise Modular, a prefabricated modular construction company, and his own design practice, DeMaria Design. We talk about prefabricated modular design, fabrication, and how that contrasts with the traditional world of architecture. We also touch on his drive to take ownership of a design from ideation to construction, the lessons he's learned throughout his career, and providing affordable housing for the people that need it most. Just to note that we had some technical issues this time around, so we're down to one camera and the audio changes about 3/4 of the way through. Otherwise, enjoy the podcast. Thanks for coming, Peter.
Thank you.
I'm happy to have you here at the Andalusia facility. We, walked around for a bit and got to see some of the materials and some of our capabilities, but your experience is so interesting to me, splitting your time between the modular prefabrication and the architecture practice you have. I'm sure there's a lot of interesting links between those two things. I know that you split your time between Los Angeles and Austin. So you have so many things going on, so much interesting experience. So what I want to do is just open it up to you and ask, for a general overview of all of the different things that you have going on between your two companies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, I I like to think that it finally pulled it all together.
Yeah.
But the more I think about that, the more I realize we're part of this continuum. It's
Yeah.
an evolution that takes place, and
Mhm.
everything kind of feeds up something else that you're working on. And eventually, what happens, you surround yourself with these great people. And usually, that's where I can chase it back to. Everyone has had an influence in some way, shape, or form. Once in a while, you have that aha moment, but they really, those things really don't come to fruition unless you surround yourself with some people who are doing some extraordinary things. So moving from the architectural world, and I say moving from it because I don't practice like a traditional architect anymore, and that really the result of many years of being frustrated with it. I don't have an axe to grind against the architectural profession, but I do know that while I was working on traditional projects, it was very frustrating to get some projects built. The non-predictability of it all, the liability that goes along with it, and not being able to deliver on the promise of excellent design because you're at the mercy of contractors and codes and all these different things. And I know we need all that, but there's a balance in there that you have to achieve. And the closer I could get to achieving that balance, it really was a result of taking more control over the process.
Yeah.
And I'm not a control nut. I just need to find the right people who know how to execute. And then I'm not at the mercy of the market. Right? So when we move into the world of productized architecture, is what I consider what we're engaged in now, there's this hybrid of the product design world and architecture. And it gives a level of control and a level of predictability that's just non-existent in the traditional world of architecture. So
What kind of people do you think are drawn to that mix of product and architecture? Why do you think that you fell in love with that kind of mix in your work?
well, you earlier in my career, when I first started, went to UT, then moved on out to LA. And I was subcontracting to these gentlemen who were architects and designing 20,000 square foot homes for bachelors. And after the second or third one, it became obscene. I was
Yeah.
like, what is going on here? I said, is this where I'm heading? And it just seemed so odd. And I said, I need to shift gears. So part of that learning experience was one where you said, listen, you have the ability to make a difference in what you're doing. Now, so I'm trying to do more meaningful work instead of just doing something for somebody who's behind an ivory curtain, and just it just got to be a bit much.
Yeah.
So I said, I've got some knowledge. And then obviously I went and designed my own home.
That's
All right.
great.
So that's what happens. And you design your own home. and you become the general contractor on it because you're the architect. You think you can do it all. And you get out there and then you learn. And what that learning process means, you make mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's how you learn. So you sit there and you start to understand firsthand what the challenges are with traditional construction and how it stops the creativity, how it can stifle that creative process. And at a certain point, you just have to give up on the creativity or you're going to go broke,
Mm.
right? You have to finish your project.
So if you have a better idea of how it actually gets built and control over the fabrication process, then you can better execute on your vision, right? Because from day one, you know the limitations and capabilities, and maybe you would go the extra mile to make to realize some of these designs. Whereas in the traditional architecture contractor relationship, you design your home and then it gets value engineered, or you lose aspects of the design, or you don't have control over how it's ultimately expressed, is kind of what I'm picking up from that.
Yeah, in fact, I think that you just hit the nail on the head. Traditional process where you have the architect, the contractor, and the owner, there's three different camps.
Hmm.
The architect says, well, I think I know what it's going to cost per square foot, and they design something. And then it's all done, designed, it's approved by the city and the governing agencies, and they send it up to the contractor, and it always comes in overbid. I've never had a contractor that comes in underbid, right? It's not because we're extravagant designers, it's just
Yeah.
the nature of the beast, right? So it comes back, and then you go through what you mentioned, this value engineering process where you're scaling back and you're starting to strip away the real essence of the design. And it just seemed like such an inefficient process.
Hmm.
Okay? So what we do, where we kind of migrated was, say, wait a minute, if we can have better control over the cost and the fabrication, like you're mentioning, then we're in a spot where it's far more predictable. The value engineering takes place in real time. It doesn't take place a year after you started the process and you got everything approved, and then you have to redo all the drawings, right? Now, the traditional architects out there are pretty good at this. They go out and they don't get involved with the predictability. They have a general idea what it costs per square foot, and they push the projects through, right? And this is a major problem. Because what happens is the owner, typically in a commercial project, the owner's like, go, go, go. Let's get our permit. The clock is ticking. So the architect puts everything out to the engineers put their drawings back, and the architects are supposed to take those engineering drawings, spend a tremendous amount of time coordinating all of them. But it never happened. Why?
Yeah.
Because the owner's saying, go, go, go. We need to get our permit. So they get the permit, right? And then they start building. And then there's this kind of profanity-laced word that's known as change orders, right?
Oh yeah.
And the change orders are 99% of the time are the result of clashings of the systems. In other words, my a pipe going through a steel column, or conduit is going somewhere where it's not supposed to be. And so, wait a minute, why didn't we catch this during the design phase? Well, remember that architect's being pushed to go, go, go. And for them to spend all that time coordinating all the engineers, really challenging. So what does the architect do? Maybe the first or second note on the cover sheet of the drawing says, contractor shall verify all systems in the building and point out to the architect prior to construction, right, where the challenges are, where the conflicts are. So that just shifted all the liability into the lap of the contractor. The contractor's supposed to be happy about that, right? This is why there's this kind of relationship where they
Oh
bang
yeah.
heads with
Adverse.
architects, right?
Hmm.
But if you can sit down at the table with the contractor from the get-go
Yeah.
and talk about what the solutions are, not only is it a better product, not only is it more predictable, but those design decisions that impact value engineering are made in real time on the spot.
Yeah, we definitely believe in that here at Andalusia. While we design, we actually have all the manufacturing files. We derive the pricing in real time. So this vertical integration is a great feedback loop to happen in real time with design. This is not one you often see in architecture,
Mhm.
but it's really interesting what you say about this adverse relationship between all the different parties involved in the design and building of architecture. Um, so because you're involved in modular construction and prefabrication, your process is a little different. So I'm just curious, what's different in your design and build process in contrast to the ordinary conventional one? Because you do a lot of your prefabrication, but then I'm sure you need the help of contractors to execute after you deliver all the modules and materials onto site.
And those contractors involved with us from day one.
Okay.
We don't design a building and then put it out to bid.
Yeah.
Because if you put it out to bid, the system that you're employing or utilizing, those general contractors are not familiar with it.
Hmm.
Right? So there's an incredible amount of trust that's involved in this because you can tell a contractor, listen, you've got the job. For some contracts, that means I write my own check, right? But we have to vet all those people and work with them beforehand, make them understand we're in this for the long haul. The reason you're here is so we can bring some predictability to it and keep the costs under control and not put them in an awkward spot when they're out in the field.
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if there is a clash of systems out there, you can't expect the contractor to eat it. They can't. They won't survive in business. So if you show them the process and it's a different process, they understand it immediately.
Yeah. It becomes a different relationship, it sounds like. So you move away from this adverse one to a collaborative one.
Yeah, and in fact, it's not just with the general contractors. In California, when we submit a project to plan check, it doesn't go to the local governing agency. It goes to a state agency. Now, the state doesn't have a plan check office. They certify third-party plan checkers. So that plan checker will either come to your office, your factory, you go to their office, and it's a real collaboration. They work with you to meet that goal of getting a safe building designed.
Yeah.
And you're not this number in that wheel of things that are done at the local building and safety department where they don't care. These engineers work with you, understand your intent, spend the time, and it's in their best interest to get the project approved as quick as possible, right? Because they're in business. They want to do as many projects as they possibly can without sacrificing safety and all those things. It's not like, well, I'm going to be working here by the hour for the next 15 years. So when your project gets through, we get through. That's what happens to the local building and safety department. And I know there's some great people there, but in general, those two systems, they're opposite, complete opposites.
Yeah, because the incentives are different, right? If you have a third party checker, like you said, they want to, move through plans, whereas government employees, they kind of are punching their time card. I don't know if that's fair to say. Yeah.
Unfortunately, that happens.
Yeah.
And so that what you're seeing is that relationship you're talking about with the general contractor also carries over into the plant checkers, also carries over into the building inspectors. So when we're fabricating in the shop, the local building inspector from the city doesn't come to the shop. It's a state certified inspector who actually plan checked the project.
Hmm.
So that person is not showing up for the first time and going, what do you have here? And what did the last guy approve? And all that madness that goes into time delays when an inspector isn't on top of things, right? And they do the best they can, but the system is not set up really for them to be efficient. When you have someone who's invested in the project from the design phase, we even have the plan checkers early on, before we even submit it. We say, this is where we're going, this is our intent, and this is our process. They're already involved in that project. They go through the plan check process with us. They give us the approval, and then they inspect it. There's no disconnect between what we're doing all the way through the process. And the traditional project is fragmented.
That's right. So it seems like you're really interested in systems. And when we first started talking, I could tell that was in the fabrication world, because obviously you have interest there, and you love the materials that you use and have, interest in those and assemblies and systems and details. But it sounds like you've also optimized this like organizational structure between the plan checkers, your contractors, your designers, and it sounds like a more harmonious system. Is that something that you've, sought to build up?
I think that's the only way we're going to improve things. The other one is kind of like putting lipstick on a pig. You you can only do so much with that system. Uh, but and what's the old saying? If you keep repeating the same process, how can you expect different results? You just can't. So we're changing the process, but we're not reinventing the wheel. Okay, we're not talking about living on Mars or anything like that.
Yeah.
But we're talking about let's take the systems that already exist,
Hmm.
tweak them, get them running at an optimal level, and that's the recipe.
Yeah.
Right? It's like we all have the same paint, we all have the same brushes and the same canvas, but how you arrange it on that canvas is the difference between a masterpiece and something that's really incredible and something that I would do, which is like a bad painting, right?
That's right.
It's really taking those systems that are already in existence. In fact, the state system, HCD, or Housing Community Development, has an incredibly efficient process that's already laid out.
Hmm.
Most architects don't even know it exists. Right? And there's no reason for them to know it unless they're going to go into a modular space. So in some ways, the policymakers are really way behind and stop everything. But in this case, that HCD department in California is right on top of things. I can only applaud what they're doing because they have opened the door for all these efficiencies to take place.
Mhm.
So that's great because you have to work within these rules, right? Or you break those rules completely, but then that's always a challenge.
That's right. Well, I'm also really interested in how these things take form physically, right? Like, so you're building modular housing, and conceptually, I think I understand. You build your frame, you finish it out, and you deliver to site a complete module, which gets stacked together, joined, and weatherproofed in some way. So, I'm interested in you know what materials you're using, how does it get framed up, how does it get to site? If you kind of want to walk me through that whole process.
Sure. I think
Yeah.
that part of that level of predictability boils down to the materials. Uh, I, wood is too unpredictable for me.
Hmm.
Even cross-laminated timber, all these new advancements in wood are
Yeah.
still wood at the end of the day. Right? And I know I might be a little short-sighted on that, but I can't see how it's superior to metal. So we focus in light gauge steel, heavy gauge steel frames when we need them, but primarily light gauge steel, cold
Okay.
form. And we have roll forming machines at our factory. We purchase the coils,
Okay.
and when we're purchasing that coil, I can make just about any size stud or joist that you can imagine. So when we're doing that, there's no change orders.
Yeah.
I never have to say, well, we'll get back to you in 3 months with that size because we need to order it from Semco or Dietrich or Clark or whoever it might be. It's like, okay, we can roll that here.
Hmm.
So there's a level of control and design control, right, that we achieve that because we have the equipment to fabricate and actually make things. Okay, we're not hindered by it. So we work in light gauge steel. We have a production line. There's a sequence of 15 different steps that take place to go from roll forming flat, you know, pieces that come off of our coil.
Yeah.
They get formed into studs. Those studs and joists go to a panel, compression table. Everything is squared up. We create walls, the integration of all the structural steel, ductwork, the punching, all of it is in there. Now, long before that happens, we have this Revit model.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's a digital twin of the building. And before the roll forming machine goes on, before we create any materials, before we form any structural components, that 3D model is created because we detect all the clashes in the systems at that phase. So
Yeah.
we don't catch them when it's under construction. So before that machine, the button gets hit, we have all the electrical, plumbing, mechanical, fire and life safety, anything that's in that building, including the furnishings, integrated into the model. So we have a full understanding how it all comes together. I think the change orders on the project are down to 1/10 of 1%. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable, right? But that's the front end work that typically is not done. Usually the architect designs this whole building, then this set of shop drawings appear long after the project is approved, and then go, oh boy, the shop drawings don't quite integrate well with everything else that we have, and then it becomes this redesign and all this other fun stuff. But the materials, I think, are while the prefab process is one that's controllable, right? And lends itself to more towards a product, developing of a product which is multi or scalable, let's say. Okay, you're repeating that process over and over and over again for these efficiencies and scale and volume. Um, it's easy to get wrapped up in that. It's easy to be the techie, right? And say,
Yeah.
oh man, we got it down. We're creating 10 modules a day and it's made out of steel. And at the end of the day, somebody moves in their house and says, I really don't give a darn if it's steel. Is it safe?
Hmm.
Is it really a place that feels good? Is it going to contribute to my quality of life? Or do I feel like I'm in a minimum security prison? Right? And I use that term because some of these tech people in the modular world, just because they get the project built is an accomplishment. But what they don't really think about is, how am I going to live in that space? What is it going to feel like? And that's really the driving factor behind all of it. We're trying to make it affordable. We're trying to make it better quality. We're trying to make it safer. But at the end of the day, it has to subscribe to whoever's going to be utilizing that building. And too often that gets left out.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're not done when the building is, looking like a minimum security prison. It's done when it feels like home, which is nice. Architecture, it feels like the building is the prototype and it is the final version of whatever you're designing. But what's cool about modular architecture to me, hearing about it as an outsider, is that you get to design it and iterate on it and make it better over time. And as far as your processes, you get a better understanding of how your system works. I don't know if you literally reuse the same modules, but I know that experience from one project will carry over into the other, which is what we're finding when we work on projects as well. So, and then if you make experience and a sense of home as one of your driving, you know, as one of your goals for the design, it sounds like you can get closer and closer to that over time.
Hmm. Yeah, you remind me of something. There is
Yeah.
this kind of experiment in urban planning called Levittown. Levittown is this place where they had these cookie cutter homes.
Mhm.
They repeated themselves over and over and over and over, and it looks almost surreal.
Yeah.
And you say, well, what's going on here? And it's the same cookie cutter house. And there's something, I don't want to say inhumane, but there's something about it that seems so machine produced that it's alienating, right? Now, but the efficiency by which those buildings are put together, which then translates into a saving in cost and better quality, is something which we want to achieve. We're striving to achieve that. So the marriage of these, the efficiencies that come from the modular process with creating architecture, the spaces that really contribute to our life, that's where that everything hangs in balance. And
Mhm.
I can give you a little example in that. In the world of products, it seems like we're far more forgiving when it comes to that. And I'm going to explain what that means. If I'm designing a home and my home looks like the guy's house next door,
Mhm.
people have a hard time with that sometimes. They're
Oh,
always
yeah.
trying to dress it up. I remember growing up as a kid in New Jersey, and we would go down to Newark once in a while. And Newark was a rough part of New Jersey, and you'd have these houses that were very similar. And people would put little statues of Mary in the front yard, and they would dress the yard up to give it this identity to reflect who they were. It was almost like changing your clothes. It was almost gave some identity to the place because it was striving for that, right? And I was doing a project in Beverly Hills, and this all comes full circle. And I had a friend there who bought, at that time, this was 15 years ago, he purchased a Mercedes, and I think it was a $90,000 car.
Mhm.
And he said, man, I really like this car. I said, that's good. And we were talking about what I was doing in the modular space. He said, I don't think it's ever going to fly. I'm like, really? I said, okay. I said, why is that? And he said, well, people want variety. They don't want the same thing over and over and over again. They won't like that. And I said, okay. Well, he just so happened to live at this intersection, and this car pulls up. And it's the same car that he has.
Yeah, that's
And I
funny.
said, hey, man, I said, nice car, huh? He goes, "Yeah, that's my car." I said, it's not your car's in the driveway. He goes, yeah. He goes, but that's the same model. Same number, yeah, same color, same everything. I said, how's it look? He goes, it looks pretty good. I said, do you like your car any less because someone else owns the same type of car? He goes, that's different. That's different. I said, I don't know how that's different. I said, I think you can appreciate something even though somebody else has it.
Yeah.
You might have a watch, you might have a surfboard, you name it. I said, we don't all buy custom clothes. I said, so I think we have to shift gears a little bit. For us to think that every building needs to be super unique, I think that's a fallacy. Now, I don't want to live in Levittown, don't get me wrong. Okay, but the systems that we create, right, are purely systems for production. How we dress them up, whether we're using a unitized facade or using an Andalusia screen or whatever it might be to give it its unique quality, that's 5% of the project.
Mhm.
But the bulk of it is like Intel inside, right? I've got this incredible thing that's a workhorse underneath all of it. So balancing that and getting the best of both worlds is where our studio spends most of its time.
Yeah. Well, I do think there's a point that everyone wants to be a little individualistic, like you said,
Yeah.
changing your clothes, right? And there's a way to express that in modular housing, right? So if it's the same cookie cutter house and I look the same as my 10 neighbors, then maybe that's a little unsettling,
Mhm.
right? We all kind of like to assemble the things that we like to show just to be individualistic and show some kind of form of identity, like you
Mhm.
said. Um, so I think that's interesting, like just straddling that line because not everyone's going to get a unique car. It's just not possible.
Right.
But everyone can kind of get the car that they like and have some kind of expression that they like, right?
Yeah.
So there's some room to play on
Mhm.
the 5%,
Sure.
which makes people's home feel like their own.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
ironic thing is there's a flip side of that
Yeah.
coin where everybody says, I want that Eames chair.
That's right. Yeah.
And like, wait a minute, the other guy has the Eames chair. Yeah, but I want that one too. I want to
Mhm.
be part of that club. And there's sometimes a sense of belonging, and whether it's right or wrong, I don't know. But I can tell you it's a human condition where sometimes you're right, we want that expression of being an individual. Uh, and other times we want to assimilate to be part of something.
Yeah, a larger identity or community, right?
Yeah,
And these could
exactly.
literally be communities. So
Yeah.
you could be, you could live in the apartment or the subdivision or
Yeah. And I think when we were mentioning earlier about the technology that we're involved in, if you can think more about it like almost the way an automobile is, or even a smartphone, it's probably a healthier way to think about it because my smartphone today does not look like what it was 10 years ago. And I can even remember having an antenna on my phone, right? And all those goofy things and this big bulky thing. And it's part of a continuum. And that same thing is happening in the prefab world, in the modular world. The technology changes, the machines get better, the equipment's better. We learn from those past projects, right?
Mhm.
And even the Greeks did it. They had Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian columns. Over time, they figured out how to create thinner columns that were just as strong as those big, heavy ones, right? From hundreds of years earlier. So I think that's a natural evolution that will take place. And that probably is new in the architectural world because if you're doing things that are unique all the time, it's always part of a continuum. But here you're saying, no, we've established a system that works. And you have to employ that system for a while in order for it to pay a dividend and for you to work all the kinks out of it. Right? One of the real challenges is you're always going to find a way to improve your system. I think more materials have been introduced to the building market since 2004, something along those lines, like in the last 20 years, than have been introduced in the previous 2,000 years. Right? There's all these new recycled materials, all this new technology, the equipment that you all have here, right? We're doing things that I've never done before. Well, that's what feeds the palate. And the technology is always changing. Imagine you get in a car and you had to roll down your windows.
Yeah.
I mean, who does that? Does that still even happen? Right? So the norm now is the power window. So that technology gets infused into these buildings, infused into these systems, and they become more accommodating.
Yeah, so if people have critiques of modular housing, they may be thinking of modular housing as it existed 10 years ago, but that kind of evolution of the technology and expression and materials
Mhm.
is only going to get better, and there's so many ways
Exactly.
to approach it. It
Exactly.
sounds like.
And look to those other case studies in the automotive world, in the technology world.
Mhm.
It's happening all around us.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of time. People would say, you know what, I have no problem with that Mercedes that other guy is driving, but with everything. Right. I don't think he'll ever go to Levittown. Right.
Yeah.
I think that example is one that's probably too foreign. But it's something that I think over time folks get used to it and it'll become the norm.
Yeah. Could you tell us about a project that you like in your portfolio where you executed this kind of modular design vision and it resulted in a cool artistic expression?
Okay. I think most of this started out. When I was that traditional architect, we were striving to get our projects built with some level of predictability. I got so frustrated. I designed this really cool building in Malibu, this house,
Hmm.
and it came back and it was over budget. Three different contractors bid it. All three were way over budget, and I knew one of them really close. I sat down with him and said, "What's happening here?" I said, I know what this building should cost. You know what it should cost. Why is it costing so much? He said, because the demand is so high, we can get whatever we want. And if you don't hire us, we can get a job down the street right now for the same cost. So at that point, I said, I'm never going to be stuck in this situation again and be at the mercy of that.
Hmm.
So at that point, I took a year off from teaching. I was on sabbatical and went and researched all the different construction methodologies around the US. And it came back with this really brilliant idea, right? And said, the cargo container was the least tapped potential system because no one had really developed it yet.
Is
I
that
said, but
right?
it had the potential.
Yeah.
So I came back, and after I had already designed my own home, it was under construction. These clients started to design their dream home. And I said, well, come on over. I'll show you. I think you're describing my house. So we walked over to my house, and they said, this is what we want. And I said, well, this is what it costs. And they said, well, we can't afford it. I said, okay. I said, well, I've got this other idea out of cargo containers. And they kind of looked at each other and they said, we actually talked about that once.
Hmm.
I said, really? And he was a marketing guy as well. So at the ideal client, we designed this house. It was 4,000 square feet. out of cargo containers. And all of a sudden, just with that inefficient cargo container, in other words, it's not scalable,
Yeah.
but you could see all of the advantages that it brought to the table that prefab and modular had. Now, was it the best? No, but it was a great step in the right direction.
Yeah.
So that got me off on a different trajectory. So at that point, when I finally, 10 years after getting awards and almost, I don't know, 10, 20 buildings we designed, many of them cargo container based, came back and I started teaching at UT. Right, at Go Longhorns, right?
That's
At
right.
UT, and I wasn't here that long. And I got a call from LA and said, listen, why don't you come back to LA? And I said, why is that? And I said, well, we want to do what you're doing on steroids with these containers. I said, I've already pushed it, man. I said, it's reached a plateau. It's not scalable. I said, don't worry, come back. Bring your family, bring your kids, move tomorrow. I'm like, I can't do that. I'm teaching at the university. Yeah. Went back to LA and met with a gentleman named Max Azaria. Max was in the fashion world for BCBG. He owned all these companies, retail stores, 2,400 of them across the United States. They sold that company, had a non-compete clause. The second love was architecture and real estate. So they said, listen, we're going to send you over to China because they had established relationships with the shipping companies for 30 years. He was the first one to start bringing things from China in the fashion world. So I said, why do I need to go there? I said, I know these cargo containers like the back of my hand. Now, Max was a genius of a guy when it came to creativity. He said, just go. Something will happen. I don't know what it is, but just go. I go to China and I get there and I've got 2,000 people at my disposal in a factory as large as Boeing aircraft. And I walked out and said, what do you want to do? So,
there you go, kid in a candy shop.
So from there, we created our own module out of shipping container parts and all that stuff, and it embodied all of those advantages we were talking about in modular. And that really started it off. And we did a bunch of projects there and came back and did 84-unit apartment building in Los Angeles. So now I had a scalable system because I wasn't recycling containers. Well, you can go even further than that by creating your own modules out of coiled steel. Right? Now you're really working at a level of efficiency that's just not attained in the container world. Yeah. So that's where we are now. So now we're connected at Mid-Rise Modular, and we're creating our own modules. And we create 2D panels, okay, for the folks who want to put together a kit of parts, like walls, floors, and ceilings are delivered individually to a job site and then assembled. Or we have a 3D volumetric solution where we do all of it in the factory, and we deliver an apartment unit to the factory. Right? And earlier, I think you asked a question about when that engineer gets involved and the contractor gets involved.
Yeah.
Our design palette starts the day we talk about where is it going to be placed. Not that we want to use limestone in Texas and be regional with our materials and all that. We understand all that stuff. But I have to consider how large that module is when I ship it down the road, because there are federal standards that prohibit you from bringing really large things down the street. So all these logistical issues get weighed into the design palette that otherwise architects just, we don't care. Deliver the wood, deliver the concrete. That's not part of it. But here, it actually will start to dictate the design palette and what your solutions are.
Yeah.
So it's interwoven in so many different ways with systems and rules that otherwise architects never even have to consider.
We talk a lot about constrained design here, right? So like if you start with your constraints and you have your shipping constraints, and okay, from day one we know all of this, then you can play within those like boundaries and deliver something even better than if you hadn't considered the constraints at all. And then at the 11th hour you try to assemble the vision of what you had with what's available, and it just sometimes doesn't work. So being vertically integrated like that, I think is a really powerful strength. Yeah.
You get to think about it a lot earlier.
Yeah.
So that
exactly
schedule
right.
that you're talking about is the same schedule, have the same deadline.
Yeah.
But instead of thinking about it from September to October, the October deadline doesn't change. You're involved in the process in January. And you're bringing to the table all these other solutions that work. And typically, if the architect is smart, they're really listening to you because you do this 24 hours a day, right? This is your world. So you have a level of expertise with these materials and these systems that architect's never going to approach. Now, the architect may have a wild idea, right? But typically, they don't know how to execute it unless they're working with somebody who's really masterful in their respective trade.
Yeah.
This is the value, once again, of collaboration and getting folks involved very early on in the process so that they can get to that deadline and it's all resolved. And those change orders, those modifications, all that stuff is done at the last minute in a rush that compromises something, quality, speed, cost, whatever it might be, that disappears.
Hmm.
It really goes away.
Yeah.
And that's why I sit here. And you notice we're not even talking about architectural solutions. We're not talking about how beautiful the building is and the quality of light and the texture. That all has to be there.
Yeah.
You have to do that, right? And so, but the process by which you get there is really what separates you from the rest of the pack. Now, we're not the only ones doing this, right? There are more and more architects and designers and product designers. Product designers are going in the architectural world, and the architects are going in the product world, and they kind of coalesce there, create this hybrid. That's where it's really exciting, because this is really in its infancy.
Yeah.
And people will say, wait a minute, modular's been around for 100 years. It doesn't work. It's not in its infancy. Well, not been around like this. The technology that we have now, I mean, just walking out on your floor and seeing how you all are cutting metal screens and things like that, like no one's had this capability in the past. And if they did, it was 10 times the size, right? And something was cost prohibitive and just couldn't do it. But with all of this new technology, this expanded palette, right? So it kind of is a residual thing and it feeds off of itself. And I think that it's just really darn exciting because this whole new branch on the tree is being sprung there. So I love the idea of working with those fellow creatives because I just learned so much from them. And I learned just enough to push the limits, or I know the limit and I know just to step over it a little bit to push it, and for some advantage, whatever it might be. But the collaboration is something now that I did not experience when I was a younger architect. You know, you kind of went in the closet, came up with your design work, and you came out and you were the hero and you did solve this thing and your clients love you. But that has changed now. And you can still do that. Don't get me wrong. There's some really beautiful projects that are built and they satisfy the client's needs. But our focus is more now on the folks who probably need the architecture and need the housing more than anyone else. So you're doing affordable housing projects or doing projects for the homeless.
Yeah.
It's a different mindset, you know. I think Andy Warhol did this. I mean, you can go buy an Andy Warhol painting now, probably millions and millions of dollars. But really, that whole movement, that pop art movement was about, let's provide art to the masses of society. It shouldn't just be for these wealthy folks who can sit in a pose for 6 months while someone does an oil painting of them, right? And it kind of blew the lid off of things. And all of a sudden, everybody said, man, this cool, hip print, right? And it was affordable, right? And I think all of us yearn for that. We all look for that beauty in life, or whatever it might be, and whether it be music or it be arts, or I think there's an internal drive that we have for that. So I don't think we're doing anything different now. I don't want to end up like Andy Warhol. Don't get me wrong. It's a pretty wild stuff, but it's the end of the road got kind of rough for him. But it really creative and blew the lid off of things. And so often we look for these case studies, right, and other creatives. And I think that we always walk into a meeting and someone says, you know, how are you so creative? How do you come up with all these ideas? And, you know, I'd love to take all the credit in the world for all these things. But in general, we are typically readapting systems, procedures, processes, methodologies that have already worked in the past in industries non-related to architecture.
Yeah. So as the more you learn about these different fields and the intersection of product and architecture, it seems like you can start to make more connections. And, you know, as you were walking around here, we were making all these kinds of connections. And it's fun when you see one system and you see another, and then you figure out how those two things can, you know, marry to produce some kind of better expression or an easier installation, or which will drive down the cost of housing and ultimately make it more affordable for the people who need it. But it sounds like you're having a lot of fun, you know, gathering all this information and making those connections.
You have to. I mean, it's your palette, right? You're the painter, and this is your paint, and you've got to figure out, how am I mixing this? How am I applying it? Do I have a palette knife? Do I have a brush? Am I just going to slap it on there? You know, you've got to get creative in that level. What we were talking about earlier when it comes to just the generic materials
Hmm.
themselves, uh, folks do get wrapped up in the technical end of it. And I think what's happened is people get so wrapped up, especially within the industry, with being able to connect things and put things together, and then all of a sudden they have this technical solution, right? But that technical solution is flat.
Hmm.
In other words, it's just a technical solution. That solution is now searching for a problem to solve because
Hmm.
it doesn't solve any real problem unless you take that and say, okay, how are we going to apply this? Man has figured out how to connect steel and bolts and wood and all of that stuff. But what is the greater calling behind this that's going to make it an incredible solution?
Yeah.
Right?
So if you find all these problems in search of solutions, then you can be the one to put the appropriate ones in your on your easel or your palette. Execute those in a way that actually delivers value to people in a way that is not flat and provides something of value, like I said, to the design, to the people who are in it,
Yeah.
to the cost. So I love making those connections as well. And as you design and you develop, you end up with all these ideas and like, oh, maybe I can reuse this someday, or this material. Oh, this is interesting, but
Mhm.
it hasn't found a home yet. So I think it's really gratifying when you can actually put things where they're supposed to go.
Great, thanks. And you don't always have to reinvent the wheel. I can tell you, I got invited to a party, must have been 20 years ago, out in Malibu. This friend of mine said, hey, when you come out to Malibu, it might have been 15, 20, something along those lines. She said, come on, I want you to meet this friend of mine, a real
Yeah.
creative guy. I'm like, okay. So I'm in LA. His name is Elon. I'm
Oh
like,
yeah.
really? I said, okay, Elon. I said, who is this guy? I said, well, she said, don't worry. He's a creative guy. You're creative. You guys, I think, will hit it off. So I go out to this ranch in Malibu. It's in the mountains there, right? And not down near the water. And it's got a split rail white fence like you'd find in Texas, for horses. And they had a big old corral, but there were no horses. There were Teslas. Like the first or second year, they were making Tesla cars.
Mm,
And I'm looking at these guys. I think I've seen these before. But basically, it's a Lotus. There used to be these cars called a Lotus. I think they're still around.
yeah.
And Elon ended up being Elon Musk, right? They have these cars out there, and they're all a Lotus body, but inside, he figured out to get all these laptop batteries, slam them in the trunk, and now you had this electric car.
Yep.
And I'm looking at this, I'm going, this is cool. And then they had a guy there from Formula One racing. He said, listen, when take the car for a ride. I'm like, oh my God, I've come to a sales barbecue in Malibu. They're going to try to sell me on how to, sell me on an electric car. I said, I'm not here for electric car. I had a little BMW convertible. I'm cool. So I said, no, go away. I said, I'm eating a barbecue. I'm here to meet this gentleman, Elon Musk. And in the corral are all these Teslas. And it's a Tesla 8, Tesla 12 on the license plate. And there's this prestigious thing about you got the number 8 Tesla that came off the production line.
Oh, so it's addition, or not the addition, but the
The
actual
sequence in
the
which they
sequence.
were created, right?
Yeah.
And all these cool Tesla people are hanging out with their cars instead of with their horses at the Kentucky Derby. They're standing alongside their cars out there, right? And it was really cool. It was kind of a cult following, and everybody was really into it. And it was a great barbecue, so I enjoyed that. And finally, the guy comes back from Formula One and says, why do you take this car? And I said, listen, I'm not here to buy a car. There was a gentleman sitting next to me from Argentina. And he said, you guys take the car. I said, you're going to give us the car. You're not going to drive it, right? It's only a little 2-seater. There was no back seat. And the guy from Argentina, he said, come on, let's take it for a ride. So we get this Tesla, and we go out on the road in the canyons now up in Malibu. I had a fast car when I was 17 years old. I had a 55 Chevy. I know what a fast car is. This was the fastest thing on the planet. This Tesla, the way it grabbed all those curves, I was holding on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling the guy from Argentina, I said, guy, what are you doing? He said, you have no idea. We get up to the top of the hill. He said, okay, we switch. And then I got in it. I sat in this car and drove down through this canyon. And it was the funnest car I've ever driven in my life. You couldn't hear any darn thing. It was like a sewing machine. And it was grabbing the road like a go-kart would, the low center of gravity. And it was so much fun. I got back in my BMW and went home that night. I felt like I was in a a covered wagon with wooden wheels, right? It was just so bad, right? But there was a valuable lesson learned in that. I said, this looked like a Lotus, smelled like a Lotus, everything was Lotus. I said, but inside, they had this different technology. Now, did he change the suspension? Did he change the body? Did he change the chassis? No. He integrated this technology that he knew about, created, and that became the start of this evolution of this Lotus thing into what we know today as the Tesla. There's a valuable lesson in that. If you try to create the ultimate solution, very often you go broke doing it. You don't get out of the starting gate.
So just one differentiator or one new capability or technology that you bring to the table.
Exactly. It's an evolution. It's a process that you go through, and it will always get better. Someone will always bring some new technology to the table to make it better, right? I mean, those cars didn't have cameras in them. Now you hit that Tesla, you see everything and everybody on every side of you, and I'm like, wow, this is great, right? And who knows what'll be there? I mean, I don't like these Waymo cars. I mean, I wish I had one, but I'm like cursing at the Waymo car in LA, right? Because this thing knows exactly what to do. And I even mess with them sometimes. I'm behind them and see and it's right on.
Yeah.
But that technology is incredible. Where's it going to be 20 years
Oh,
from now?
I believe you. If I see a Waymo taking a left turn, I'm crossing a street. I'm praying because I don't know if it's going to run me over or not. I hope the engineers did their job.
Yeah, I love it and I hate it, right? But I genuinely am fascinated by it because it's a symbol to me of limitless possibilities.
Yeah.
Could you imagine 125 years ago, somebody sitting on their porch here in Texas, somebody goes by with a horse, and then this thing comes by with wheels on it, making noise and smoke coming out of the back of it, and you're like, what was that?
Definitely. I think progress happens faster than you think. And, just because we're used to the way things work today with AI, with electric cars, I think it's all going to get turned on its head every 5 to 10 years. And we just, I don't know why it's so hard for us to get used to that pace of change because we always resist it. But if you can find a way to use those advancements in the work that you do, I think that's the best way to prosper in your field, in your craft, and in your business, if that's what your ambitions are. But obviously, we're really interested in technology and design technology. I do a lot of design automation for the products that we saw out there, unique pattern generation, and not only on the design front end, but how it gets integrated down the line and actually validated and buildable. So on that note, I know that there's a lot of systems integration that has to happen with these modules. You have to coordinate the electrical with the plumbing, with the structure, cut these in predictable ways, and have the assembly process well oiled, because all these things contribute to the cost being low of the modular housing, which is one of your value propositions. So I'm curious if there's any interesting ways in that you've leveraged design technology, so design automation, to coordinate these systems to streamline the digital design process. Or if you're more interested in the fabrication side, any novel techniques that you've used to streamline those processes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the technology is all feeding the fabrication process.
Yeah.
I think the AI and the ability to really explore many different design options, from massing of buildings, setbacks, colors, textures, materials on the exterior, all of that happens very early on in the process. Why? Because we're trying to bring some level of predictability to that process. If I can see what that building feels like from day one, I'm far more inclined to say, yes, let's go, or no, change this with some level of certainty. I went to visit some friends who have a company called Boxable. They're in Las Vegas.
Okay.
Yeah, really doing some incredible stuff. And we walked into one of their rooms, massive room. It must have been, maybe 70 by 70 in terms of its size. There was nothing in it.
Feet or?
It was just a vacant room.
Okay.
I said, what's going on?
Yeah.
And they will put on this AR.
Oh.
Augmented reality, right? And we put this thing on, they hit the button, and I started walking around the building, right? And I have this head, and I'm literally, as I'm walking through the house, I'm scared because I'm going to bump into a wall. And it was that realistic, So what's happening there, I think, is that technology is enabling folks to see an end product so that they don't have to say, we trust the architect, right? Because sometimes things don't end up the way people envision them. And so if I can give a better understanding of what something looks like from the start, you'll get more buy-in. Or you'll be able to say, no, we don't want it with some level of certainty. Right?
Yeah.
So in that regard, AI and being able to explore the design possibilities is limitless, and it's really exciting. Right? I am not scared of, I think it was Joe Walsh. Joe Walsh is the guitar player for the Eagles. He said, when AI can tear up a hotel room and smash the walls with their guitar, he said, then we're in trouble. He said, but till then, it's not happening.
Yeah. Right?
In other words, there's this personal part that we bring to the equation that is, that's a level of passion, it's an insight that I don't care how much data you plug in. There's always these creative thinkers who are outside the norm that defy the logic of the past that set new boundaries, right? Last night, I think, I'm not sure, it was one of those Hollywood award programs Glenn Close was on, and I just watched this for just one moment.
Oh, yeah?
And Glenn Close spoke about, she was remote, and so she was giving a little talk, and she spoke about how when she was young, one of the directors just whispered in her ear when she had messed up on one of the scenes, and he said, you know what, just let the angel come out, and it will take over and you'll be fine. And she said she relaxed, and then the scene went really well. And she said, that's the part that you really can't quantify. I'm paraphrasing that, but that's the part you can't quantify. But that angel that whispers in your ear, that enables you or prompts you to do something different, can't be achieved in the AI world. Don't get me wrong, give you quite a bit of flexibility. It's a really cool options. But I think for the progressive folks who are really innovative, my business partner would say, you know, I'll be nice. He says, garbage in, garbage out. He uses another term. Right?
I love that. Yeah, there you go. Just sitting up for garbage.
This is Texas. I can probably get away with the real quote, but we'll leave it at that family program. But I think that that's the part of it. There's a human element that is just incredible. And when I look at Elon Musk, and I look at Leonardo da Vinci, and I look at Michelangelo, and I look at all these great artists in history, they thought beyond the norm. No one could pinpoint, no one could even rationalize what they're doing. I mean, why do you shoot a car into space? I mean, get a rocket and shoot your car on this trajectory, and like, how do you rationalize? You can't. So there's an irrational part of design that stretches the limits. Oliver Wendell Holmes mentioned, you know, man's mind stretched to a new dimension never goes back to its original size. And that's what the creatives do. You know, that's the role that they play. So yes, it's exciting to be involved in all of that. That collaboration and that open-mindedness that you need in order to I think, sustain in this new playing field. Yeah. I can't emphasize things.
Yeah. Are you seeing AI more in your own work for visualization, or clients that come to you with the AI generated DALL-E image of some wacky concept that they had? Because I've seen that a time or two now, where it's just like, you know, a concept which was just obviously AI generated. So now we're not even working from human creativity. I guess you could call it curation. You know, you say like, you make a few concepts and then you choose one, and this is the one you want to build. But it feels like pretty often that designers sometimes are handed something pretty loose, and even now it's looser because it wasn't even conceptualized, it was just generated, right? So I don't know, do you have any thoughts on that, or have you seen that at all?
And I think if architects don't pay attention to that, they're going to lose their value. Because it is really easy for someone to pay $15 a month, get the ChatGPT advanced program 4.0, whatever it is, and it will generate these buildings for you. Right? And some of them actually look halfway decent. But if that's what the value is, and it just has to look good on the surface, then it's kind of short-sighted. Okay? So if you're in that world of, well, does it look good? Does it not look good? I think you're going to be displaced very quickly. Right? Now, it's a tool. So you've got, I mean, clients have been able to pick up plywood and everything else for the last 50 years. They don't go home and build their house. I mean, some do, but there's a quote. A friend of mine was talking. He said the architects spend so much time to try to convey to the client what the process is. And very often, they're very, they're articulate. And they make something very complex sound very simple. And most of the clients who hire an architect are usually pretty sharp people. And you listen to this process and say, you know what? I think I can do this. This doesn't sound like rocket science, right? And then they come back with their sketch and all that other stuff. And the architect very quickly, I think, will be able to show them, listen, this is good.
Yeah.
But it's not great. I mean, we're in business of doing things that are great for our clients, not good for our clients, right? And imagine, and we've heard this before, you go to the doctor and say, listen, man, your appendix is shot. We have to remove your appendix. So naturally you say, well, doc, how are you going to take out my appendix? How does that work? You know, I haven't researched this on YouTube yet. They said, well, we do this, this, and this. And so what happens if, you know, this happens? They're in different scenarios. And the doctor's done it before. He said, this is the way it works. And it's all these different procedures. But imagine that person who went to see the doctor said, I get this. He made it sound pretty easy. I'm going to go home and cut out my own appendix, right? Now, no one would ever do that. But for some reason in the architectural world, they think, the architect made it sound easy. I got AI. I got all these other tools. I can go home and design my own thing, right? And they do, and they go back, and it looks like a botched appendix removal.
Right? It's funny because you don't know what you don't know, right? Like everyone thinks they can do something before they've, you know, actually worked with the ins and outs of that thing, you know, day in and day out. It really takes a long time to master a craft. Architecture is one of those, like, decades of experience are only gonna like sharpen the tools and make you a better designer. And it's crazy to think that you can pick that up on day one with the Dolly image generator or something.
Well, that points to the second part of your question. When it comes to the factory and production, fabrication of products within the building, you have to have a working knowledge of plumbing, electrical, mechanical. Right? And I do have all that just because I've been in the field for so darn long. But there's another part of it that our overriding goal is not to create a prefabricated building. Our goal is to remove as much as possible the construction that takes place at the job site. It just so happens the modular factory is the conduit by which you can achieve that. So you're going to find that our roofs that are typically 90% of the modular buildings that are out there, maybe more, all put the roof on at the job site. We don't. I'll just put it in the fact, but you have to figure out how to make that happen. You have to understand the systems and waterproofing and everything else. 70% of the lawsuits in architecture are about waterproofing. So you really need to pay attention to that, right? When it comes to our facade, we use a unitized facade. That means the facade of our building is placed on our modules. When the modules are brought together at the job site and putting the building out, it's watertight. I don't have to have scaffolds on my building, right? So you say, wait a minute, no scaffolds on the building. In an 8-story building, how does that work? Well, the technology exists, right? That's already used on high-rise buildings. We're just readapting it into the modular world and making it happen there. I don't like the mechanical guys. I mean, they're great guys, but I have to leave holes for ductwork and connecting of modules. We've eliminated all that. We use systems that have no ductwork, right? All of this stuff, each little incremental step adds up to a unique solution that at the end of the day you say, this just makes sense. Why have we been struggling with this for so long? It becomes an obvious kind of solution, and you're not reinventing the wheel.
You're taking all the trades under one roof. So you know you have an idea of the design as a whole, and you have a working understanding of all disciplines, so they can, you know, work with each other instead of fighting each other.
I'm not sure if you have any mechanical contractors that listen. I hope you do. So I'm going to give you a little prop to them. When we use our mechanical systems, very often we're using what we call a mini split system. It's an isolated system that works just in that one apartment. And those are used all over the United States. Mitsubishi makes them, Bosch, LG, everybody. But they have a condensing unit. We all know what a condensing unit is. It's a noisy thing out in the side yard or up on the roof with a fan in it that cools things, and a Freon line runs out there. When you're doing an 8-story apartment building and you have 72 units, you're probably going to have 72 condensing units. And they're up on the roof or they're in the side yard. It's a mess. But they work. I can show you thousands of buildings that have. Every one of those units has to have a freon line that goes from the condensing unit back to the unit. That freon line is made of copper. If anything happens to it, you got to call them back out. They need to recharge it, fix it, all that badness. We found a system that eliminates the condensing unit.
Okay.
Wait a minute, what's going on here? Well, the system costs 3 times as much as the regular one. And they said, well, we don't want to use it. It costs too much. I said, okay, let's take a look at that. The actual unit itself costs 3 times as much. But the labor to install it is 1/10.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, wait a minute, if you calculate that, it costs less. Exactly.
Oh.
So you're utilizing a system, right? And you're readapting it to your focus, to whatever you're doing, and all of a sudden it's a great solution. And the value is, wait a minute, the value is the labor and the product, not just the cost of the product.
Mm-hmm.
And when I talk about those scaffolds on a building, well, not only with the modular building do you get a better quality product, it's done faster. So instead of taking a year to build something, it's taking me 7 months. That means those additional 5 months of carrying costs, insurance, you're absolved of that. And you get a return 5 months earlier.
Mm-hmm.
That's the value proposition. So the value prop is speed.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, they cost about the same. Sometimes a light gauge steel building costs a little bit more. But if I'm getting a return on my dollar 5 months earlier, and I'm absolved of 5 months, and I'm just like 40% of a project or whatever it is, that time frame, that's a major savings.
Oh yeah.
Right? And developers, I mean, when you're working in a single family home, someone goes, we're stuck in a hotel or in the rental unit for another 2 months. It's not a big deal. But if I'm doing 100 apartments or 500 apartments, and I'm saving 40% on my time frame, the developer is going to kiss you every time they see you.
Definitely.
You know, because that's where it becomes far more predictable. The project's done in an earlier time frame. You get a faster return on their investment, and it enables them to do more volume.
Yep.
So the benefits go on and on and on. I don't want this to be a master class in modular, but you're asking the right questions, and I see so much of it in what you all have here.
Yeah.
You've got some technology here that's unmatched. It's really beautiful, and the
Yeah.
results, I mean, the products you all are creating are really, really beautiful, and they all lend themselves to modular and prefab. Because you're running it through a machine, it's coming out the other end, and it's done. I don't know how quickly your machines work, but I can tell you just from what I've seen, it's a product-driven sensibility, but there's customization in there that makes it stunningly beautiful and unique. I don't know that you all have any limitations. You have a creative person like yourself sitting behind a computer, inputting patterns and whatever that final result you're looking for.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like you're hindered in any way. So you have the best of both worlds. I've got a building that's got hundreds of thousands of components. You may have one sheet, and that one sheet, you have such control over it. And you can give me 1,000 variations on how that sheet is cut or bent or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. So we want to be like you. That's what it is. We want to be like Andalusia. You're our case study.
That ties back to productized architecture. So
mm-hmm.
I think it's a great mission, and I think it's a really interesting line to straddle. I haven't had a whole lot of exposure to modular, so I'm doing a lot of sitting and listening. So to like understand, how it all works and what the different processes are and how it all gets delivered. But I think, like you said, there's a big value to vertical integration and to making sure that you have the right equipment at the start,
mm-hmm.
Or paying a premium, for better system solutions, materials, because they might pay dividends in the future, right? Like faster time to delivery, better quality of products. I think I'm a big fan of investing in the beginning so that you get a better, faster result later.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to hear all this, but you and both your company and the folks of your age are the future of modular. It's not the people who are my age. And even though they can work until they're 90 years old, I think Frank Gehry's 95 years old, still practicing architect, right?
There you go.
Typically the folks who are my age or in their 50s, they have to unlearn what they know, and it's very, very difficult.
Well, that's. I did want to comment on that because it seems like you like to rethink all of the assumptions that you had before, right?
Yes.
like, do I actually need a contractor because they screwed me on this one job? I want to like take control of it, do it myself, so that we can, deliver a better product, less time, less cost. And it seems like you did that. So it seems like you're one of the original case studies and one of the people pushing, that forward. So, as much as we may be the future, you're going to be around a long time doing this through your companies, and younger people will take note of that and just carry the baton forward, which is how technology works. Yeah.
And the general contractors out there,
Yeah.
they're good and older like me too.
Yeah.
But there's general contractors who are your age, and their DNA is different. For them to see a Waymo car, it's like, what's the big deal? And the guy who's my age sees the Waymo car and goes, don't get in there.
Yeah.
Don't want to drive in that, right? You have a different mindset. You see the world through a different lens. Those folks, you're not going to take the general contractor out of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
You're just going to have the right general contractor that becomes part of that collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
That's the beauty of it.
Definitely.
The ones the guys who put horseshoes on a horse that draws a wagon,
Mm-hmm.
they went out of business. Technology just forced them out, basically.
Yeah.
And people will have to keep up in that general contractor arm of the entire process.
Yeah, it sounds like another arrangement that kind of works in the same vein of aligning incentives and making sure everything gets delivered faster is like the design build model, where you have the architect and the contractor working together from the start, which is really similar to what I think you've set up as well.
The design build process works.
Yeah.
And you'll notice that all the really large construction companies, Swinnerton, Skanska, I think even Perini, whenever they have a design build proposal, you say, why would they do that? Why don't you just do what you do best?
Mm-hmm.
But because there is so much finger pointing, you say, wait a minute, let's collaborate. Let's get everybody on the same page, be part of the same company. The buck stops here.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And there's some efficiency in that just cannot be surpassed.
Yeah.
And many clients, many owners are just like, of course I want that. The last thing I want is that architect arguing with the general contractor. I've seen it in so many movies, I've read about it, I go to dinner, all my friends complain about it. Why do we keep repeating that process?
Mm-hmm.
So the design build option is very attractive. Now, if you can introduce into that a fabrication shop,
Mm-hmm.
wow, then you're really super efficient. Then there's total control over it, and then all those change orders, all those conflicts, they start to disappear.
Yeah.
Right? And then it becomes a pleasant process. You know what I mean? And if that process is one that's great, and it's one that people are enjoying it too, like that's win-win.
Yeah. So what are you looking forward to? Through your work, like what milestones are you hoping to hit going forward with modular construction or architecture or anything?
Okay, a couple things. Right now, we're involved with a project down at UC San Diego.
Okay.
And they contacted us. We're working with the engineering department there. Right now, you can only go 8 stories legally with light-gauge steel. We're down there, we created a 10-story building, okay? Half of it is made out of modules, 3D volumetric modules, and the other half side is made from panels that are put together in the field. Right alongside each other, 10 stories high, the largest earthquake shaker table, okay, in the US.
Okay.
And we're testing that to see if it can withstand these 7.0 and 8.0 earthquakes on the shaker table. So we're pushing the envelope on the capability of the light gauge steel. We always have to do things that are safe. In the US, I don't know that you ever walk into any building and go, is this building going to fall down? Am I safe here? You don't.
Yeah.
Okay? There's codes and all those things that protect us. So we're pushing the envelope with the material itself. Okay? In addition to that, I don't lose track of what the technology, what that problem the technology is solving. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that I lived in Los Angeles for quite some time now. I lived in downtown. And you can come out and there's homeless people living on the sidewalk. And I can tell you, you spend one night on the sidewalk and it will change your life. It will change your life completely. And when I see this, I'm going, do we wait for the policymakers? Do we wait for everybody else to come up with a solution? Or just be as proactive as you possibly can, make whatever positive difference you can, and hopefully the powers that be who can execute these things on a much larger scale will take note and say, let's embrace that technology and let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because this homeless challenge has been around since the beginning of time. It's not going away. Right now, I'm not the guy who says give everybody a fish. I am the guy who says teach them how to fish. Right? But there are some folks in Los Angeles who should not even be out on the street. They just don't have the mental capacity to function, and it's a downward spiral. And I've seen it firsthand. So in that regard, we know that we can help those people. At the same time, we're helping the entire building and construction and design industry. There's a residual effect to all these challenges that we're solving. So I think it's limitless. Mm-hmm. It's not like we're going to come up with that solution and then we've got it and we're done. Because that technology keeps changing and our quality of life keeps improving from generation to generation with the technology and with all those other things that really make your home a special place. So I don't know that there's any end in sight. Someone asked me when I was retiring, and I said, dude, I don't know what that word means. I said, I'm enjoying myself. Don't get me wrong, it's hard. What we do is very challenging. We're up 4:30 in the morning in our factory. Mm-hmm. The entire crew is there. I have 50, 60 guys there working at 4:30. They're out by 1:30. They go home, spend the afternoon with their kids and their family. They miss the traffic and all that. But people are committed. I keep working after people go home at 1:30. My business partner, he continues working because we love what we do. Yeah. But it's also hard work. You know, I think the way the folks that win the Super Bowl love to win the Super Bowl, but it's hard work. You know, you have to put in the time to make it happen. So I don't know where. I don't know if there's any end in sight, and I'm excited about the next generation and what they're doing. Like, we're bringing this technology to the forefront. You know, someone else is going to look at it in a different light, right? And I explain this to folks. I even have clients. I said, listen, I have this solution. This is what we do. And then every time I meet with another creative, they see a way to readapt what we've created to meet their needs. Mm-hmm. Right? And it's contagious. It just has this ripple effect. And there's a matrix that comes from that central point. So I don't know where it's going.
Yeah. It sounds like you love the challenge of, you know, pushing the capabilities, like, you know, stepping over the line, as you said earlier. So going from the 8-story limit to 10 and testing the earthquakes, I think that's, you know, that's a fun technical challenge. And if you can achieve that, then, you know, you have, I guess you can just be proud of that achievement and, you know, enjoy yourself while you solve it with other creatives. Mm-hmm. But it also sounds like you have a broader mission to, you know, kick the ball forward and to help the next generation and other designers to collaborate on your ideas and make them their own, and, you know, push the ball forward in that sense. And then also, you know, helping the people who need solutions like this, you know, cheap solutions, and who don't, you know, who shouldn't be sleeping on the street. So I just think it's like a great mix of things, and it's like a really good purpose to like drive you forward, and to keep, you know, to keep the interest in the work you do. And I mean, if I had all of those things to like move me forward, then I wouldn't want to retire either.
Yeah, that's not on the radar. That's for sure. It just keeps getting more exciting, and
that's great.
We keep working with other people who just make all the difference. So it's not just the people who are solving the challenges for, but when you start collaborating with these other people who are brilliant people, far beyond me. I mean, I'm like really low on the food chain when it comes to some of the knowledge and the brilliance that comes out of these folks. It never gets boring. Mm-hmm. It's always exciting, and it keeps you motivated.
Yeah,
it's what we call the juice, right?
There you go.
Yeah, it's the thing that really motivates you. We all need this mission, and that's probably what you just defined. I couldn't do it that well, but you kind of took it all. And made sense of it all. I don't know if I've been able to do that ever.
I'm glad we could like tease that out and kind of explore that, because I think it's helpful for people too to figure out what drives them and why they're doing what they're doing. You know, I feel lucky to enjoy my work, and yes, it sounds like you do too. So that's really great. So we're coming up on an hour and 15. Is there anything else you want to cover?
World politics, I know the Middle East, we got a whole bunch of issues we can talk about.
We could open that up right now.
Yeah. There's one thing I want to mention. I'm giving a talk up at Stanford University in April.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking to the earthquake engineering department. Right? I'm on the lecture series for earthquake engineering. These are all engineers, period. And I got invited to this. I'm not an engineer, obviously.
Yeah.
But I do see the future in many ways what you're describing, what's happening next. Those engineers need to think more like architects, and architects need to think more like engineers. Right? Because the two of them together is such a powerful force. It's not 1 + 1 = 2, it's 1 + 1 = 57, right? It just blows the lid off of things exponentially. And I'm really encouraged by that because Stanford University could invite an engineer that knows all about earthquakes. And they can talk more about data and numbers and all that. But they're going to get from me what my goal is in the building. We're all going to have to deal with earthquakes. That's been around. And they're going to figure it out. I know. They're really sharp. They get it. Okay, but they can start to understand the motivation behind it. All of a sudden, they do things that are not, what did we say before? What did I call it? Garbage in, garbage out. They start to become critical thinkers. And when they sit down at the table, they say, you know what? I heard you speak about this. And I thought about that. And I took it all and come up with this hybrid idea that maybe you can do this. And that they bring to the table might be something I've never even considered. That's how the beauty of collaboration blows the lid off of things. That's why it's so exciting. And you go, there's no limit on this. If you can get people thinking, not like-minded, but just having that respect of working with the others, and understanding we're all going someplace, right? Someplace positive, right? There's no limit on what comes out of it. That's why it's so exciting and so encouraging, and you know, I get worked up about it. I genuinely love the creative process. So I'm very excited to go speak there because it's not the traditional architectural audience, that I get to talk to. And I'm not going to talk any sense into them. But I want them to be more aware of what the architects are facing and how those architects need them, not just to figure out how the building stands up, but all this product engineering. There's more engineers than architects in the product world. They figured out how to get all of that information, all those apps in that phone. Architect didn't do that. So it makes sense for an architect to really try to understand that engineering mind. And it's possible. Da Vinci and Michelangelo, they were engineers, painters, sculptors, architects, the whole deal. Some great things happen when that coalesces. So thank you for having me here. I'm really, you got me charged up. I'm excited about what's happening today.
That's great.
And your factory is, we're going to use your products. I can see it already. You know, and I'm encouraged by it because when I was teaching, and we would talk about quite a bit of what's out there, but we could never find someone who had the machinery. I mean, you've got state-of-the-art equipment here. You've got everything someone could really want for a large scale or a small scale project. So I'm encouraged by that because I don't know where it's going to go. I had an original idea of what I want to do, but now I see what you create, and it's blown the lid off of me. God, now I can really push the creativity here. So I appreciate that, man. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming, Peter. I love pulling from two directions. Architecture, engineering. For me, design and software development. You coming architecture and us product people, I think beautiful things come from those intersections of things and pulling from two directions. So I'm excited to hear how your talk at Stanford goes and how it goes talking to all those earthquake engineers and some interesting collaboration comes out of that. But I'm sure it will. I'm sure new ideas will come out of that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. We'll be coming full circle. I'm sure we'll be collaborating on some stuff together as well.
Okay, sounds great.
Thanks again.
Thanks, Peter.